My name is Alina. For 5 years, I worked as a nanny in one of the richest houses in the city. I took care of a beautiful little girl named Lily. Her father, Daniel Whitmore, owned several technology companies and people called him a genius in business. But inside that big mansion, I saw things no one else saw. And one day, something happened in that house that changed all of our lives forever. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Daniel was supposed to be on a business trip in Chicago for another 2 days. At least, that's what everyone believed. His wife, Sophia, was 8 months pregnant at the time. She was kind, gentle, and honestly one of the sweetest people I had ever met. But there was one person in that house who hated her. Daniel's mother, Margaret Whitmore. She looked like a perfect lady from the outside. Elegant clothes, pearl necklace, perfect smile. But the moment Daniel left for business trips, she became a completely different person. I had seen it many times. And every time it happened, my stomach twisted with fear. That afternoon, Margaret arrived again. Her expensive black car slowly stopped in front of the house. I was in the kitchen feeding little Lily when I heard the front door open. Margaret walked in without even knocking. She had her own key. She always did. "Sophia," she shouted through the house. Sophia slowly came down the stairs, holding her back. Her pregnant belly was huge now. She looked tired. "Hello, Margaret," she said quietly. Margaret didn't greet her. Instead, she looked Sophia up and down with disgust. "So," she said coldly, "you really think this baby will secure your place in this family?" Sophia looked hurt. "That's not fair," she whispered. "Daniel and I both wanted this child." Margaret laughed. A cruel laugh. "Oh, please. You saw a rich man and got pregnant as fast as possible." I felt my hands shaking in the kitchen, because I had heard this conversation before. Many times. But that day, something was different. Margaret walked closer to Sophia. Too close. And suddenly, she grabbed Sophia's arm. Hard. "Listen to me carefully," she whispered. "You will never belong in this family." Sophia tried to pull her arm away. "You're hurting me." But Margaret squeezed even harder. And then she said something that made my heart stop. "When that baby is born, I will take it away from you." At that moment, I heard something outside. A car door closing. Footsteps on the front porch. And then, the front door opened. Standing there was Daniel. He had come home 2 days early. And what he saw next destroyed his entire world. The moment the front door opened, everything froze. Margaret immediately released Sophia's arm. Sophia stumbled back, trying to steady herself. Daniel stood in the doorway with a suitcase in one hand. In the other hand, he was holding a small box of pastries. He had probably brought them for his wife. But now he wasn't smiling. He was staring at his mother. "What's going on?" he asked slowly. Margaret recovered quickly. Her face suddenly changed. Her voice became sweet. "Oh, Daniel, you're home early." She walked toward him like nothing had happened. "I was just checking on Sophia." Daniel didn't move. His eyes shifted to Sophia. She was rubbing her arm where Margaret had grabbed her. And even from across the room, you could see the red marks on her skin. Daniel noticed it too. "What happened to your arm?" he asked. Sophia forced a weak smile. "It's nothing." But I knew that look. I had seen it many times before. Fear. Margaret laughed lightly. "Oh, please, Daniel. Pregnancy makes women emotional." Daniel didn't laugh. His eyes slowly moved between the two women. Then he asked the question that changed everything. "Did you hurt her?" Margaret looked offended. "Excuse me. I asked you a question." Margaret crossed her arms. "You're really asking your mother that?" For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then something inside me finally broke. For months, I had stayed silent. Because I was afraid. Afraid of losing my job. Afraid of Margaret. But looking at Sophia, standing there terrified and pregnant, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Mr. Whitmore. All three of them turned toward me. My hands were shaking. But I forced myself to speak. This has been happening for months. The room went completely silent. Daniel looked at me. What do you mean? I took a deep breath. Every time you leave for business trips, your mother comes here. Margaret's face turned red. Elena, she snapped. Go back to the kitchen right now. But Daniel raised his hand. No. His voice was calm. But dangerous. Let her speak. Margaret stared at him in disbelief. I continued. She insults Mrs. Sophia. She calls her a gold digger. She grabs her. Sometimes she pushes her. Sophia started crying quietly. Daniel's face slowly changed. The more I spoke, the darker his expression became. Then I said the thing that made him clench his fists. Last week, she forced Mrs. Sophia to clean the floor on her hands and knees. While she was 7 months pregnant, Daniel turned toward his mother. His voice was barely a whisper. Tell me that's not true. Margaret didn't answer. She simply rolled her eyes. And that silence told Daniel everything. For the first time in his life, Daniel Whitmore looked at his mother like she was a stranger. And then he said 2 words that no one in that house expected. Get out. For a moment, no one moved. I had worked in that house for years, and I had never seen Daniel like that. His voice had always been calm, respectful, especially with his mother. But now something inside him had changed. Margaret stared at him. You can't be serious, she said. Daniel walked toward the front door. Then he opened it. I'm completely serious. Margaret laughed coldly. You're throwing your own mother out of the house. Daniel didn't hesitate. Yes. Margaret's eyes filled with anger. I raised you alone after your father died. I worked 2 jobs. I sacrificed everything. Daniel nodded slowly. And I was grateful for that my entire life. But that does not give you the right to abuse my wife. Margaret pointed at Sophia. This woman trapped you with a baby. Daniel's voice suddenly exploded. Enough. Even little Lily upstairs started crying when she heard the shouting. The entire house went silent. Daniel stepped closer to his mother. If you ever speak about my wife like that again. His voice dropped to a whisper. You will never see me again. Margaret looked shocked. You would choose her over your own mother. Daniel didn't hesitate. Yes. Sophia covered her mouth, crying harder. Margaret grabbed her purse angrily. You are making the biggest mistake of your life, she said. When this marriage destroys you. When she takes your money. Don't come crawling back to me. Daniel didn't respond. He simply stood by the door, waiting. Finally, Margaret walked outside. A moment later, her car engine roared. The sound of tires disappeared down the street, and the house became quiet again. Sophia collapsed onto the couch, crying. Daniel sat beside her and gently held her hands. I'm so sorry, he whispered. You should have told me. Sophia wiped her tears. I didn't want you to choose between us. Daniel shook his head. There is no choice. You and this baby are my family. But standing there in the hallway, I felt something terrible in my stomach. Because I knew Margaret Whitmore very well. And I knew one thing about her. She never accepted defeat. Not ever. And by the next morning, Daniel would realize something terrifying. Throwing her out of the house was only the beginning. The real nightmare was just starting. The next morning felt strangely quiet. Too quiet. Sophia stayed upstairs resting. She had barely slept after everything that happened. Daniel didn't go to work. He stayed home, walking around the house like a man trying to understand a nightmare. I was in the kitchen preparing breakfast for little Lily when Daniel's phone started ringing. He looked at the screen, then frowned. "Uncle Victor," he said quietly. He answered the call. But the moment he put the phone to his ear, I saw his expression change. "What are you thinking?" his uncle shouted through the phone. Daniel pulled the phone slightly away from his ear. "Good morning to you too," he replied calmly. "Don't play games with me," Victor continued. "Your mother called us last night." Daniel sighed. "Of course she did. She told us you threw her out of the house like a criminal." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. "That's not what happened." "Oh, really?" Victor said coldly. "She told us she went to check on your pregnant wife, and you humiliated her." Daniel's jaw tightened. "My mother has been abusing Sophia for months." There was silence on the line. Then Victor laughed. "Daniel, listen to yourself. Your mother would never do something like that." Daniel's voice became colder. "I saw it with my own eyes." Victor's answer came quickly. "Or maybe that woman you married is manipulating you." Daniel hung up. He didn't even say goodbye. But the phone kept ringing. Again. And again. And again. Aunt Clara. Cousin Mark. Family friends. Everyone was calling. Everyone believed Margaret. Daniel finally turned the phone off and placed it on the table. For a long moment he didn't move. Then he whispered something so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. How did everything fall apart so fast? But the worst part was still coming. Around noon, someone knocked on the front door. Daniel opened it. Two people were standing outside. A woman with a folder. And a police officer. "Mr. Whitmore?" the woman asked. "Yes. My name is Karen Doyle. I'm with Child Protective Services." Daniel's face immediately went pale. "We received a report about this household." "What kind of report?" he asked slowly. The woman checked her notes. "A report that your pregnant wife may be living in unsafe conditions and could be in danger." Sophia appeared at the top of the stairs. Her face filled with fear. I felt my stomach drop. Because we all knew exactly who had made that call. "Margaret." The officer spoke calmly. "Sir, we need to come inside and ask a few questions." Daniel stepped aside and let them enter. But as they walked into the house, I saw something in Daniel's eyes. Something that hadn't been there before. This was no longer just family drama. This was war. And Margaret Whitmore had just fired the first shot. After the visit from Child Protective Services, everything in the house felt heavy. Like a storm was hanging above us. The officer and the social worker spent almost an hour inside. They asked Daniel and Sophia many questions. They checked the house. They looked inside the refrigerator. They inspected the bedrooms. Sophia kept trying to stay calm, but I could see the stress on her face. Her hands were shaking. When they finally finished, the social worker closed her folder. "Everything seems fine here," she said. "But we will keep the case open for monitoring until after the baby is born." Sophia looked like she might collapse. Daniel thanked them politely and walked them to the door. The moment they left, Sophia burst into tears. "I can't do this anymore," she cried. Daniel immediately hugged her. "It's going to be okay," he said softly. But I could see in his eyes. He didn't believe his own words. For the next 2 days, Daniel barely slept. He was constantly on the phone with lawyers, trying to protect his wife, trying to stop the chaos his mother had started. But stress has a way of building inside people. And eventually, the body can't take it anymore. 3 days later, it happened. I was upstairs putting Lily down for her nap when I suddenly heard Sophia scream. A scream filled with pain. I ran downstairs. Sophia was standing in the hallway, holding her stomach. Water was spreading across the floor. Her face was pale. "Elena," she whispered. "I think the baby is coming." My heart stopped. "It's too early," I said. But Sophia shook her head. "It's happening." Daniel rushed down the stairs when he heard us. "What's wrong?" Sophia grabbed his hand. "My water broke." Daniel didn't waste a second. He grabbed the hospital bag we had prepared weeks earlier. Within minutes, we were rushing to the car. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Sophia cried with every contraction. Daniel held her hand the entire time. "You're strong," he kept telling her. "You can do this." At the hospital, nurses rushed her into the delivery room. Doctors began preparing immediately. Hours passed. Sophia screamed, cried, pushed with everything she had. Daniel never left her side. He wiped sweat from her forehead, held her hand, encouraged her every second. And finally, late that night, a sound filled the room. A baby's cry. The doctor smiled. "Congratulations. It's a girl." Daniel started crying immediately. He didn't even try to hide it. The nurses cleaned the tiny baby and wrapped her in a blanket. Then they placed her in Sophia's arms. Sophia looked down at her daughter with tears in her eyes. "She's beautiful," she whispered. Daniel gently touched the baby's tiny hand. Her little fingers wrapped around his thumb. And in that moment, everything else disappeared. The lawsuits, the lies, the family drama. Nothing mattered anymore. Sophia looked up at him. "What should we name her?" Daniel looked toward me, standing quietly near the wall, watching everything. Then he smiled. "Elena." My eyes widened. Sophia smiled softly. "After our nanny." Daniel nodded. She was the only person brave enough to tell the truth. Sophia kissed the baby's forehead. "Elena Grace Whitmore." And for the first time in months, peace finally filled the room.